Pata plus or minus Jali is a Sanskrit proper name. Several important Sanskrit works are ascribed to one or more authors of this name, and a great deal of scholarship has been devoted over the last century or so to the issue of disambiguation. Amongst the more important authors called Pata plus or minus Jali are, the author of the Mahabharata, the first Patanjali, an advanced treatise on Sanskrit grammar and linguistics framed as a commentary on Katyayana's Varatikas on Power to the first Knees or to the first Dioya. This Pata plus or minus Jali's life is the only one which can be securely dated. The compiler of the Yoga Zatras, an important collection of aphorisms on yoga practice, who according to some historians was a notable person of Samkal, contemporaneous with Ishvara Krishna's Samkal Karika around 400 CE. Patanjali is one of the 18 Siddhas in the Tamil Siddha tradition. The author of an unspecified work of medicine. In some Sanskrit grammatical works, Pata plus or minus Jali is called the man from Gonada. Gonada is the ancient name of Gonda, a district of Uttar Pradesh, about 50 km north of Ayodhya. Greek chronicles mention about Patanjali, when they laid their siege on Sakit, that is Ayodhya, in 2nd century BCE. This implies that Patanjali most probably was from Gonda, a district of immense importance where Buddha and Mahavira resided. In fact, Shravasti, just off Gonda, further to north, was a center of power during that millennium and was the capital of the said Janapad. Beside, this was an area of traditional Sanskrit learning. Some hold the view that he was born at the Gonada situated at Tirukonamalai, Sri Lanka. This tradition is corroborated in Tirumala's 7th century Tamil Tirumandiram, which describes him as hailing from then Kailasam, and tradition has him visiting the Thilai Nataraja temple, Kadambaram, where he wrote the Sharana Shrangarahita Stotram on Nataraja. Name: the compound name Pata plus or minus Jali has been explained by Sanskrit commentators in two ways. The first explanation of the word is or plus or minus Jale Patanti Pata plus or minus Jali, which is a Maya or Vi or to the first Saka D compound with angstrom or Kandvor D Sandi. The name comes from a legend about his birth which says that Shea to the first pounder, the divine serpent king, incarnated as a snake eloped and fell into the folded hands of a Brahmin. The second explanation parses the word as a Bahuvali compound Patanto Namaskar Riat Vinayananam or plus or minus Jaleo Yasman via to the first pound Izar. The compound name Patanjali, Patan is bank and Jal is water, in the Sindhi language of the Indus Valley civilization. Life: that the Pata plus or minus Jalis who wrote on yoga and on grammar were two different scholars was compellingly argued by the great scholar of Sanskrit literature, Louis Renner. Many outstanding scholars since then have re-examined the question and come to the same conclusion. The tradition that one Pata plus or minus Jali wrote treatises on grammar, medicine and yoga is memorialized in a verse by Bhoja at the start of his commentary on the Yoga Sutras. This tradition is discussed by Muhlenbeld, who traces this relatively late idea back to Bhoja, who was perhaps influenced by a verse by Bhatta to the first Hare that speaks of an expert in yoga, medicine and grammar who, however, is not named. Grammar tradition: in the grammatical tradition, Pata plus or minus Jali is believed for the reason given above to have lived in the 2nd century BCE. Some say that he lectured on Paninian grammar at a place called Nagarkapa, which is identified with modern-day Nagakuan. He lectured for 85 days, which resulted in the 85 Nikas or daily lessons of the Mahabharata, the first Patanjali. Many writers in the grammar tradition, including Bor to the first Oja Dakar to the first Pandita, Hari Dakar to the first Pandita, Narjai Bor to the first, and Kaunda Bor to the first, held Pata plus or minus Jali to be an incarnation of the mythical serpent Shea to the first pound A. Yoga tradition: in the yoga tradition, Pata plus or minus Jali is a revered name and has been deified by many groups, especially in the Shaivite Bhakti tradition. It is claimed by some that Pata plus or minus Jali is an incarnation of the mythical serpent Ananta. This Pata plus or minus Jali's Olva comprises the sutras about yoga and the commentary integral to the sutras, called the Bor to the first Patanjali. In the past, the sutras and the Bor to the first Patanjali have been considered by some to have had different authors, the commentary being ascribed to an editor. However, a recent comprehensive re-examination of all the evidence has confirmed the view of many older Sanskrit authors in the period before 1000 CE that one and the same person composed the sutras in the Buddha to the first Patanjali commentary. The same study also confirms the date of composition of this work as falling in approximately 400 BCE. Tamil Shaivite legend. Regarding his early years, a Tamil Shaiva Siddhanta tradition from around 10th century AD holds that Patañjali learned yoga along with 7 other disciples from the great yogic guru Nandi Deva, as stated in Tirumala's Tirumandiram. Nandi Aril Petra Nadarai Nordanam Nandikal Nalvashiva Yoga Maa Muni Mandra those Huda Patañjali Vikramarendra Varinodu Enmayumam. Translation. We sought the feet of the Lord who graced Nandi Keswa, the 4 Nandis, Shivoka Muni, Patañjali, Vyarapada and I, we were these 8. The ancient Kali Kautavam also describes how Patañjali and Vyagrapada gathered along with the gods in Thilai near Kadambaram to watch Shiva and Kali dance and perform the 108 mystic Karanas, which formed the foundation for the system of Natya Yoga. He has also written Sharana Shrangarahita Stotram on Nataraja. This Tamil tradition also gives his birthplace in South Kailasha Kontsvaram temple, Trincomalee. Some other traditions feel that his being born in Paratavarsha the part of the ancient world corresponding to South Asia is beneath his godlike status, and that he must have been born in the Chaumbudvipa, the mythical center of the universe. Patañjali as Siddha is also mentioned by the goldsmith sage Bogga. It was why my grandfather who said, "Climb and see." But it was Kalanitha who gave me birth. Patañjali, Vyajarama, and Shivoji Muni also rightly said, "Look! This is the path." A Europogga 7000. This tradition also holds that Patañjali was a master of dance. Other legends. In one popular legend, Patañjali was born to Atri and his wife Anasaya. According to this tradition, Anasaya had to go through a stern test of her chastity when the Trimurti themselves came as bhikshaks and asked her for bhiksha. She passed their test by accepting them as her children and fed them. She got the boon where all the 3 Murtis will be born to them. They were Somaskandan or Patañjali, Dattatreya, and Devasa. Samadhi. The Samadhi of Patanjali Maharishi is believed to be in Tirupata Brahmapuriyeswara temple, where Lord Brahma installed 12 Shiva lingams and worshipped Lord Shiva to get back his tejas. Shankaracharya's guru had told Shankaracharya that Patanjali was reincarnated as Govinda Bhagavapada and was meditating in a cave somewhere in the state of Samadhi. Ascribed works. Whether the 2 works, the Yoga Sutras and the Mahabharata the first Patanjali, by the same author has been the subject of considerable debate. The authorship of the 2 is first attributed to the same person in Bojadeva's Rajamatanda, a relatively late commentary on the Yoga Sutras, as well as several subsequent texts. As for the texts themselves, the Yoga Sutra 44 cites a sutra as that from Patanjali by name, but this line itself is not from the Mahabharata the first Patanjali. This 10th century legend of single authorship is doubtful. The literary styles and contents of the Yoga Sutras and the Mahabharata the first Patanjali are entirely different, and the only work on medicine attributed to Patañjali is lost. Sources of doubt include the lack of cross-references between the texts, and no mutual awareness of each other, unlike other cases of multiple works by Sanskrit authors. Also, some elements in the Yoga Sutras may date from as late as the 4th century AD, but such changes may be due to divergent authorship, or due to later additions which are not atypical in the oral tradition. Most scholars refer to both works as by Patanjali, without meaning that they are by the same author. In addition to the Mahabharata the first Patanjali and Yoga Sutras, the 11th century commentary on Charaka by the Bengali scholar Kakrapanata the first Idatta, and the 16th century text Patanjali Krita ascribes to Patañjali a medical text called the Karakapratissa to the first Florence Scar to the first Toryen, which is apparently a revision of the medical treatise by Karaka. While there is a short treatise on yoga in the medical work called the Karakasaya to the first Florin Hita, towards the end of the chapter called Angstrom Rasthana, it is notable for not bearing much resemblance to the Yoga Zatras, and in fact presents a form of eightfold yoga that is completely different from that laid out by Patanjali in the Yoga Zatras and the commentary Yogasutta the first Patanjali. The tradition that holds that all three works are by the same author is summed up in this verse from the beginning of Bhoja's Rajamaratanda commentary on the Yoga Zatras. Yogina Sitasya, Padanavaka to the first florin, Mala to the first florin Ara Rasayakar Vaidiyakana Afoyapakara to the first florin Pravera to the first florin Munanawa to the first florin Pata plus or minus Jalia to the first florin Pra plus or minus Jalia and Natosmia 5. AAA currency Yena currency OAAA Yena currency 5 Yena currency Yena currency Sha Yena currency Sha currency AAA currency AAA Euro AAA Yena currency Sha Yena currency Yena 4 Yena currency Yena currency AAN currency AAN Euro AAA currency Yena currency OAA currency AAN currency Yena currency OAA 5. English translation: I bow with my hands together to the eminent sage Pata plus or minus Jali, who removed the impurities of the mind through yoga, of speech through grammar, and of the body through medicine. Yoga Zatra. The yoga tradition is much older. There are references in the Mahabharata, and the Gita identifies three kinds of yoga. The Yoga Zatras codifies the royal or best yoga practices, presenting these as an eight-limbed system. The philosophic tradition is related to the Sankara school. The focus is on the mind. The second sutra defines yoga Euro. It is the cessation of all mental fluctuations. All wandering thoughts cease and the mind is focused on a single thought. In contrast to the focus on the mind in the Yoga Sutras, later traditions of yoga such as the Hatha Yoga focus on more complex asanas or body postures. Relevance of his contribution to yogic traditions: Pata plus or minus Jali defended in his yoga treatise several ideas that are not mainstream of either Sankara or yoga. He, according to the Iyengar adept, biographer and scholar Kofi Bizia, acknowledges the ego not as a separate entity. The subtle body linga sarira he would not regard as permanent and he would deny to direct control over external matters. This is not in accord with classical Sankara and yoga. Although much of the aphorisms in the Yoga Sutra possibly predates Patanjali, it is clear that much is original and it is more than a mere compilation. The clarity and unity he brought to divergent views prevalent till then has inspired a long line of teachers and practitioners up to the present day, in which BKS Iyengar is a known defender. With some translators he seems to be a dry and technical propounder of the philosophy, but with others he is an empathic and humorous witty friend and spiritual guide. Mahabharata the first Patanjali. The Mahabharata the first Patanjali of Pata plus or minus Jali on the or to the first I or Ya of Pa to the first Ni is a major early exposition on Pa to the first Ni, along with a somewhat earlier Vartika by Katyayana. Here he raises the issue of whether meaning ascribes to a specific instance or to a category, Kim Puna Akriti H Padartha H, Ahosvid Dravyam. Now what is meaning, of a word? Is it a particular instance or a general shape? This discussion arises in Patanjali in connection with a sutra that states that a plural form may be used in the sense of the singular when designating a species. Another aspect dealt with by Patanjali relates to how words and meanings are associated. Patanjali claims Shabdaprama sent now that the evidentiary value of words is inherent in them, and not derived externally. The word meaning association is natural. The argument he gives is that people do not make an effort to manufacture words. When we need a pot, we ask the potter to make a pot for us. The same is not true of words. We do not usually approach grammarians and ask them to manufacture words for our use. 27. This is similar to the argument in the early part of Plato's Cratylus, where morphemes are described as natural, for example the sound L is associated with softness. These issues in the word-meaning relation were elaborated in the Sanskrit linguistic tradition, in debates between the Mimamsa, Nyaya and Buddhist schools over the next 15 centuries. Sphota, Patanjali also defines an early notion of sphota, which would be elaborated considerably by later Sanskrit linguists like Bhartrhari. In Patanjali, a sphota is the invariant quality of speech. The noisy element can be long or short, but the sphota remains unaffected by individual speaker differences. Thus, a single letter or sound such as K, P or A is an abstraction, distinct from variants produced in actual enunciation. This concept has been linked to the modern notion of phoneme, the minimum distinction that defines semantically distinct sounds. Thus a phoneme is an abstraction for a range of sounds. However, in later writings, especially in Bhartrhari, the notion of sphota changes to become more of a mental state, preceding the actual utterance, akin to the lemma. Patañjali's writings also elaborate some principles of morphology. In the context of elaborating on Patañjali's aphorisms, he also discusses Katyayana's commentary, which are also aphoristic and Zatra-like. In the later tradition, these were transmitted as embedded in Patañjali's discussion. In general, he defends many positions of Patañjali which were interpreted somewhat differently in Katyayana. Metaphysics is grammatical motivation, unlike Patañjali's objectives in the Ashdyayi, which is to distinguish correct forms and meanings from incorrect ones. Patanjali's objectives are more metaphysical. These include the correct recitations of the scriptures, maintaining the purity of texts, clarifying ambiguity, and also the pedagogic goal of providing an easier learning mechanism. This stronger metaphysical bent has also been indicated by some as one of the unifying themes between the Yoga Sutras and the Mahabharata. The first Patanjali, although a close examination of actual Sanskrit usage by Woods showed no similarities in language or terminology. The text of the Mahabharata, the first Patanjali, was first critically edited by the 19th-century Orientalist Franz Kalen, who also developed philological criteria for distinguishing Katyayana's voice from Patañjali's. Subsequently a number of other editions have come out, the 1968 text and translation by S. D. Joshi and J. H. F. Rudbergen often being considered definitive. Regrettably, the latter work is incomplete. Patanjali also writes with a light touch. For example, his comment on the conflicts between the orthodox Brahmanic groups versus the heterodox, Nastika groups seems relevant for religious conflict even today. The hostility between these groups was like that between a mongoose and a snake. He also sheds light on contemporary events, commenting on the recent Greek incursion, and also on several tribes that lived in the northwest regions of the subcontinent. See also Bhartrhari, Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, references.